Hey guys, just a quick note before this episode starts to apologise for the audio quality on my microphone. There was a technical gremlin that was unnoticed at the time of recording. It affected this in one TV review that we did in the same day that went out a little while ago, but I sound like I'm coming through like a phone line or something. It's listenable, but it's not great. Obviously, if it's something we'd caught, I'd have fixed it. It never happened before. Obviously, we know to look for it now. So apologies for that. Hopefully, you enjoy the show. Hey everyone, and welcome to the Atomic Cinema Experiment. I am Peter. Why are you shaking your head at? Tara's here.
Greetings, citizens.
We are a science fiction movie podcast. Every week we get together, we talk about sci-fi movies that we've watched, and this week we are sticking to our time travel season, which we are hitting out a classic. We're doing the 1960 version of The Time Machine, directed by George Pal. So as we're going to talk about, we'll start spoiler-free, as we always do. We'll give you a warning somewhere in the middle before we go into spoilers, but that is the plan. So, yeah. Tara, had you seen the original Time Machine before?
Yes, but it's been a long time since I had seen it. Probably since the 1960s, as to get to the joke before you do.
I didn't. I was not going to make any old age jokes. Don't be silly.
I saw this movie when I was a kid, and I had a lot of flashbacks to it while watching it, but I, for the most part, didn't remember it very much.
I'll be honest, I thought I'd seen this, and I'm not sure if I did, now that I've watched it again. Like, I'm not sure if I actually had seen it already. I assumed I had.
Guess it is very unique.
Yeah. So, yeah, I don't think I had. I think this was a first time watch for me, even though I didn't think it was when I was starting it. I was like, yeah, I've seen this. Well, yeah. So it's got that classic time machine. I think everyone's seen. The sort of disc at the back, and it's the chair, and it's a bit more hokey than because for me, the quintessential time machine for me is the DeLorean. Okay, like that's what I grew up as the main form of time travel. Either that or the orb of electricity.
I've been a fan of the train.
The train? Oh, especially when it gets upgraded.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, yeah. Obviously, we'll talk about Back to the Future at some point properly, but just want to point out that train scene at the end of Back to the Future Part 3, the little kid starts pointing at his penis at one point during the scene, and once you've noticed it, you'll never not see it every time you watch that movie.
What?
Yeah, it looks really creepy because it's just when Doc's talking to Marty and he's sort of crouching down. He's introduced his family that he's got now, and at one point the kid behind him just starts like pointing at his penis really subtly. And the actual theory is that what he was doing is he was trying to point off to whoever was in charge of looking after the kid actors on set. He was trying to tell them that he needed to pee. That's the theory, but it looks really creepy in the scene. He just starts pointing at his penis just randomly. But once you've noticed it, you'll never not notice it after that.
It's like the stormtrooper who hits his head on in the New Hope. Yeah. I probably watched A New Hope 50 times before someone would told that to me, and now I can unsee it every time.
Yeah, apparently in the original cut, which I've never seen because George Lucas has made it impossible to see the original cuts of Star Wars, but apparently at one point, and this is a really weird thing to leave in there because, audio can be edited out quite easily, but apparently you can hear Mark Hamill shout Carrie instead of Leia at one point in the original version.
Oh.
Which is really funny, like, because they could have just taken that. It's not like they could, even in the 70s, they could have edited that out.
They probably just didn't even notice.
Yeah, exactly. Because there's one in Aliens.
Like Stormtrooper hitting his head. You're so into the scene that you don't even notice it.
Because there's one in Aliens where when Bishop's like cut in half. I guess spoilers for Aliens, but I mean at this point, Aliens. And he goes to like grab Newt as she's like sliding down the ship towards the end of the movie. I had never noticed this. It was the quadrilogy box set that came out in 2003, 2004.
With the commentary.
Yeah, add the commentary, and James Cameron, who should do more commentaries because he's actually really good at them when he does them, he points out that you can actually see Lance Henriksen's body coming through the floor to like when he goes to reach at him, like his real body that's sort of like hidden under the floor.
Right.
And once he pointed that out, because he even said himself, I saw this movie maybe like 10 times in the edit or whatever. It was like dozens of viewings before I noticed it, and now I can never not see it. And then I could never not see it. And then the funny thing is that when the Blu-ray came out, he didn't do anything else, but he did digitally go in and remove that body, that mistake, so you can't see it anymore. And I noticed it and went, I see it, Big Jimbo. I see you fixing that.
Yep.
That mistake. So
I still have the special edition version of the film, so I can see it.
Yeah, you can see it. So anyway,
because I listened to the commentary and I remember him pointing it out.
Yeah, yeah, such good extras on those Alien movies. Some of the best best ever. I've actually watched the big making of documentaries on at least the first two a couple of times because they're just because I got that box set for Christmas when I was like 14, and I remember spending like Christmas and Boxing Day just watching all the big 3-hour documentaries of all 4 movies. That was my Christmas that year because I'm a movie nerd.
It's a good year.
Yeah, hearing about how Alien 3 was
Must have
meant to
been a
take
good boy.
place on a wooden planet, and was I a good boy that year? I don't know. Probably. I didn't get into trouble. I was a boring kid. And it wasn't because I wanted to be good. I just didn't have the effort or the energy to be mischievous. I didn't care. I just want to watch movies. Leave me alone. Piss
I was
off.
way too afraid of my parents to do anything wrong.
Really? Nah.
Mm-hmm.
I never was, but I mean, hey, I worked out okay. I worked out okay in the end. More or less. I do have that nervous tick that I have sometimes. I'm just, maybe a few dead bodies somewhere, but that's neither here nor there. So Time Machine, classic story of Time Machine, where it is actually very straightforward in that it is just he's built a time machine and he wants to go into the future to see how things turn out. But it's worth mentioning that it's set in it's actually just before New Year's, 1899, so it's the turn of the century. So
Everyone's excited about the future.
yeah, and it's made in 1960, of course. So it's important to know those two dates. The one that's set in that date, but it was made in 1960. So they obviously in 1960 they only knew up until 1960. It'd be very easy now to have them go 100 years into the future and be like, it's 1999, and for us that'd be like, oh, that's how quirky. 1999.
I imagine that's going to happen when we watch the remake eventually.
I don't know.
The Guy Pearce one.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I don't think I've seen that one. I don't know if he does go to like that kind of time
I've
period.
actually never watched it either, and even as a super fan of science fiction, there are some films I just skip.
Because it just looked like a remake, right? It looked like a pointless remake.
Yeah.
Even though I hadn't seen the
Like
original.
the Total Recall remake. It looks
Oh,
like
yeah.
the RoboCop remake. It looks like everything. Yeah.
We're gonna have to do all those at some point. Let that settle in.
I just looked up the book is originally published in 1895.
Oh, right, so it's set basically when the book came out, more or less, then.
Mm-hmm.
Which is cool, and he's telling all of these like hoity-toity dinner buddies. That's one of the things that whenever movies are set in this time period, it's always the sort of rich upper class people that we're always following. We never like see common folk. It's always people who can afford carriages and get together for brandy and cigars and and whatever else.
I think there is a lot of parallels to The Invisible Man, the type of people that you see, and I think it's
Sure.
because it's the same author.
Yeah. So he actually like shows up and he's been in his adventure already. So the movie actually takes place in retrospect because he's telling his buddies what his adventure was, and it goes back to when he first introduced the idea of a time machine, and then we see him go through this journey. And the first half of the movie is a lot of just kind of exploring different time periods until the main bulk of it in the second half is in this far it's like 78,000 something like in the future. It's silly, like the apocalypse has happened and then like society's kind of reformed, like like we're that far in the future. So that's the gist of the plot. So I will ask the question, Tara, did you enjoy The Time Machine?
I'm going to say yes. I did really like it, but it is pretty hokey.
It's hokey, yeah. It definitely.
It is very much like it's trying to go for a deep theme, and I think in the beginning, like that's very clear, and then it kind of goes a little off the rails and becomes like an original series Star Trek episode for a little bit, which I still enjoy watching. And I have read the book a few times, and I really love the book. It's a like super easy afternoon read too, if you ever want to check it out. And it is very faithful to that, with the exception of the main theme that they're trying to push in the beginning, which I actually I really like that theme, but then they kind of abandon it. So
yeah, because it does have of course the anti-nuclear sentiment, the anti, not even just anti-nuclear, it's just anti kind of like war basically. But definitely because it was made in 1960, there's definitely at least a hint of but there's a portion of the film that takes place in 1966, and that part to me really felt specifically about nuclear, like arms race with the sirens and things like that. We'll get into that in spoilers, but
yeah,
that part to me felt like that. I mean I enjoyed it as well. Again, I kind of agree that it's a little bit a little bit cheesy in places. It's a little bit of a old school movie.
it's a little dated.
Compare it to The Invisible Man, which was obviously 30 years almost before it. I think Invisible Man holds up better. Comparing it to, say, 10 years before this, Day the Earth Stood Still, which has some similar themes, I think that holds up better. Day the Earth Caught Fire, which was like 2 years after this, 3 years after this, I think that holds up better. But it's still an enjoyable time, and it's funny you bring up Star Trek, because I was actually thinking the same thing. See, once he started like meeting the cultures in the far future, I'm like, this is a Star Trek episode. This is legitimately an episode of the original series, just before the original series was a thing.
There was something I felt that was just missing in the early parts of the film that made it come off a bit more boring than I was expecting it to, because there's so much spectacle, and like even when you're just watching people have a conversation, like that can be some of the most interesting dialogue, about time travel. Like that would be incredible, of people who are excited for the future of humanity now that we're entering another century, and it should be a lot more interesting than it is. I find it actually a bit dull. And I'm not really sure why. I think it's just the direction. There's not a lot of there's not a lot of music in the beginning. It's kind of stuffy, and there's not a lot of editing or movement of the camera.
It's a very static film. It's very much an old school kind of just set the camera kind of, and look at
but even like The Invisible Man, which came out in the 30s, had like a lot of that still.
Yeah, no, it did. It definitely did. It's a very laid back direction of a film. I think for me, the reason why the first chunk of it feels like it almost feels like they're just so impressed with themselves that they're able to even pull this off, that they're more concerned with just having him go through different time periods and talk about what's happening than they are to actually put in a story. Like, there's not really much of a story until the back half of the movie. And because it legitimately is like halfway through the movie, it's not until we get to the year 78,000 something that really a story starts to form and take place. Up until that point, it's basically if you were watching Back to the Future and the first half of the movie was the whole first half was just explaining like, oh, we can time travel. Oh, look, we're in the 50s now, isn't that? But there was always a story in Back to the Future. Very quickly, it plants all these seeds so that as soon as he hits the 50s, like, oh, there's his parents, there's Biff the bully. It starts like you start to see how it's going to play with these ideas to create a story. In this movie, there's nothing to really create a story outside of just the core idea of like conflict and like, oh, everyone wants to fight and make bigger bombs and kill people, and like, I want a better future than that, and that's why he's determined to go. I also thought there was a really silly element at the start where, so it flashes back to the first night he has all his friends over to float the idea of, hey, what if we could travel in time? And he has this little miniature version of his time machine. Why he actually built it as a chair, I don't know why. It's just it's one of these hokey things where, like, okay, I get why the big one has a chair because you're planning on traveling in it, but surely the first one could literally be a box.
Put my little Ken doll inside and watch him go to the future.
But I thought it was really weird how he does this little demonstration with the little version of the time machine for them, and he just sends it somewhere. He doesn't even know where he sends it. It's just like, oh, it's disappeared. And I'm like, it's basically just a magic trick then. You have to make it show up in a minute or something. In Back to the Future, that's literally what happens. They send the car into the future.
He's excited.
He sends it into the future.
Although he just let a time machine go somewhere in time, which could be dangerous.
Yeah, they send it a future, and I thought they were going to bring it back up later because they established the idea that they don't move through space, which is actually very Back to the Future as well. It just moves through time. And I thought there was going to be a point in the future, like in 78,000, where we saw that the little one just like appear like near the big one, as if like, oh, that's where it went to. But they never did anything with it. I thought it was going to be like a joke where it appeared at some point later on. Maybe knocked out one of the bad guys or something. I don't know.
Yeah, or maybe he just gave time travel technology to somebody in the future who shouldn't have it.
Exactly, yeah.
Maybe he created a supervillain.
Because what rubbed me the wrong way about it is that he then said, look, that's proof it disappeared. It's proof that time travel's possible. And I'm like, that doesn't prove time travel. It proves something disappeared. That doesn't prove that
Which is the point that, everybody makes there anyway.
Yeah, so I'm like, no, you're not, like, I feel like in this scene, we're supposed to be on his side, try to convince the others because we want to believe it's real, but he's actually making it hard for us to believe it. We're like, no, it doesn't prove anything. I'm on their side.
I do remember watching this scene as a kid and thinking that was really cool, but maybe it's for the kid.
Yeah, kids are stupid though, so it's fine. um, so yeah, so he goes on this journey, and it's like there's very little other characters that we've known. There's one kind of love interest that kind of becomes a thing in the back half of the film, because it's funny. I messaged you. And I kind of said, "Oh, this is very reminiscent. You can tell what era this was made in." And I was thinking of Day the Earth Stood Still and Earth Caught Fire because of the message and because of the nuclear side of things.
Mm-hmm.
And you kind of assumed that I meant the treatment of the female characters was going to be dated. And my response is like, well, technically
it's
no.
Usually the thing that comes up.
And I said at that point in the film, I said technically no because there's not really been any yet. So they can't mistreat them when they're not there. I suppose is a really cop out answer to it, but. There is definitely a couple of moments with this love interest later on, this Weena character, which, by the way, Weena, what a stupid name. That's spelled, for the record, Weena. Weena. Weena.
Yeah, it's not a great name, but
it sounds like you're saying wiener, but with
who am I to judge a culture in the future?
It sounds like you're saying wiener, but with an accent. Like you got a Weena.
It sounds like like a British accent. Weena.
Weena? I don't know if I agree with that, but
yeah, because the Brits, they swap the ER sound and A sounds all the time. Like vanilla would be vanilla. I know Connor says vanilla.
Well, that's an English thing. I don't say that. That's an English thing, not a British thing.
It's an English thing. Okay.
Yeah. I'm not accept. I've never said vanilla.
You don't. You're right.
And you can confirm it because at the end of every TV review I say, "Have you got any vanilla?"
You should start saying vanilla.
If anything, I associate that with like a specific part of the US. That idea of adding the ER onto words. Yeah, I don't know which
Not
part.
anyone that I've been to.
I'd have to give it some thought. Maybe the South.
I think it's an English thing.
Okay, all right. What's that? Talking about accents, so there's a Scottish character in this, which I suppose we can't overlook. His best friend, Georgie's best friend, is Mr. Philby, David Philby, or James. I don't know which one because we meet his son and he plays both
David.
roles. Is David the old one? Okay.
Yeah, David's the first one.
Yeah, he's got a very kind of upper class Scottish accent. He's like.
He's actually Scrooge McDuck.
Yes,
he does the voice of Scrooge McDuck.
Yeah, he's literally the voice of Scrooge McDuck. So yeah, so he is ginger. He's got a mustache. He's a whole thing. And I thought, oh man, I'm borderline offended at this portrayal of a Scottish person. But I kid, no. But they've got him here.
He was a delightful character. He's so easily likable.
He was a delightful character.
I especially love the part where he dives into the money pit and makes fun of his nephews for being annoying.
That's it. I thought that seems a little out of place, though. It didn't really fit the themes of the rest of the film.
Money, 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 money.
I especially there's a nice touch where
maybe that's where the little tiny time machine went. That's how Scrooge McDuck got his fortune.
There was a nice little touch where his son didn't have the Scottish accent because clearly he's living in England because everyone else is English. So his son doesn't have that accent, which was a nice touch.
Slipped through a little bit. I heard it sometimes.
A little bit, but even then, you could explain that as well. His dad was Scottish, and so he has a little bit, like sort of. Like,
yeah, you're right.
You know, speaking around the house, he picked up the little mannerisms here or there, yeah.
That's true.
Yeah. So yeah, that's a tape. There was a thing. And then one of the guys, because there's like 4 guys who comes to see him. There's the one kind of main fat guy with the mustache who kind of is like the main well, not antagonist, that's not the right word, but he's the one who's constantly doubting everything he says. Oh, this is balderdash. Yeah. What?
Yeah. We just watched him in a recent Twilight Zone episode too. He played Mr. Pip in the Nice Place to Visit.
Ah, okay. I didn't recognize him.
But he has like all white hair in the Twilight Zone episode. But
now that you've said it, I can see it. I can hear it in his voice. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
What of balderdash? With a time machine, we can do time travel. What? I'm the Monopoly Man.
I say.
By gosh, George, he's got it.
I love it.
I don't know how much my Scottish accent came through in that, or was I successfully doing that stereotype of the Monopoly Man?
It's my BBC impression.
Oh dear. Don't be such a plonker now. Anyway, I don't know why I said
We've got one guy who's a Brit on the on CNN, who's every time he starts talking, he goes from like 0 to 100. He's always so shouty. I can't remember his name for the life of me, but he's like the most British person that you guys had, that you had to send him out here for some reason. Oh, I can't think of his name.
Did we? Is it Piers Morgan? Did we send that prick across? I don't think so.
No, that guy's an asshole.
Yeah, he's the worst. He's terrible. I only guessed him because I feel like
British. Richard Quest.
Oh, that's
He's
such
shouty.
That's such an English name as well. Richard Quest.
Oh my God, he is the shoutiest person on TV, but it's just super.
Why don't you join me for some tea and then we'll hunt some foxes in the back? What?
Richard Quest.
We'll play a game of. Yeah, that's a tangent. Actually, what's that game though? What's that game rich people play where they have the little like croquet bats and they hit the balls through little gates.
It's not croquet.
It's probably croquet. Yeah. It's not cricket. No, it's like they have it's like a little mallet and they play. It's almost like silly looking golf.
I think it's croquet.
Yeah, I think it's croquet. You're right. I said it when I was thinking of the name of the bat. That's not the dumbest thing I've said on a podcast. I once was talking. I think it was a countdown episode, but I was talking to Connor and we were trying to like guess more places in Korea, like more cities. We couldn't name any cities, and we mentioned Seoul, of course, because everyone knows Seoul, right? Or if I'm probably butchering the pronunciation of that, but like we're talking about the movie Train to Busan, and everyone says I can't think of any other cities in Korea. That's weird.
Busan.
Yeah, Busan. Yeah, it's Train to Busan. Jesus. Except
I love Busan, by the way. If anybody's listening from South Korea, I love Busan.
But here's the thing,
there's a really awesome Indian restaurant in Busan on Hyundai Beach, inside of a mall. I can't remember the name of it, but it's on the first floor, and there's a Dave and Buster's there for some reason also. But don't go there. Go to the go to the place and get curry. The Indian restaurant. Can't remember the name of it.
I was just going to say that we never actually realised our dumb mistake in the podcast. It wasn't until after where I realised when I was editing it, and I had to put in a comment and just said, I realised how stupid that sounded, that we didn't think of Busan. God damn it.
Right. Well, at least Connor didn't know either.
Yeah, we both came out looking like idiots. But yes, so that was the thing I was going to say actually when we got into when I was describing the fat man with the voice and we did all the impressions. There's an American there as well, and then there's one other random English guy. But the American and the other English guy are just kind of there. We never really talk to them, or like they're just like the third and fourth person in the room. Basically.
No, they're there just to have tea and be, I don't know, posh.
I say, let's have some tea and crumpets, my good man. Then a good brandy. Yes, very good indeed.
Richard Quest.
Do you know what's annoying? The amount of Americans who probably think that I'm making fun of my own accent when I do that because they think England and Scotland are the same place is infuriating. Ah, dear. Oh dear. What was I? What was I was watching? Or some people were talking about something, and there was like a weird accent. That's what it was. Yeah, someone heard a Newcastle accent, and an American said, "Oh, is that guy Scottish or Irish?" And like both Scotland and Ireland are just like, "What the f?" We do not sound Scouse.
Well, you guys have a lot of castles.
True. I mean, I'm sorry.
It's true. I mean, I used to tell people when I first moved to the U.S. that I was from British Columbia, and they thought that I was from South America.
I'm sorry, do I sound like this? I want some chicken and a can. Do I sound like that? Roller coaster.
Very good.
Yeah. Oh, Tim was telling me as well because he's from Rhode Island, and whenever he used to work at like a call center in Rhode Island, and whenever like people would phone him and they'd say, "Where are you, Rhode Island?" and they'd go, "No, I demand to speak to someone from America." Oh, people can be so dumb.
Yeah.
Oh dear. I love it. I love the idea of Tim being told, "I demand to speak to an American." All right.
It's like the most American white person you've ever
I
seen.
know. I know. Um. Right. So that's the characters, and like I say, there's not much story until the back half. I think the movie never really rises above its B movie charm. I think, because we even get people in
I
costumes
would
towards
agree.
the end. We get like monster, not quite monsters, but they're kind of monsters.
Yeah, I don't hate their design.
I think they don't look great once they're in the light. I actually think there's some great moments before we see them properly where they're in the shadows and we just see their eyes kind of
Hmm.
glowing. I think that stuff actually, that looked surprisingly good. Like I was actually kind of impressed. I was like, oh, that actually was a creepy little moment. Like I wasn't expecting that.
Yeah, yeah, I know what you're talking about, but yeah, they are a little bit like Star Trek Gorn.
They are, no. Actually, more than
Costumey
that,
where they're a little slow.
it was because we were talking about how it felt like a Star Trek episode in the back half. It wasn't just the types of people that were around and the clothes they were wearing, which felt very Star Trekky. It was also the sets, especially the underground set. It looked like the fake rock that you'd always see on Star Trek. That
Yeah.
classic episode when he's holding the cock
It's
rock. Like it's that type of set.
it's also just very there's something very charming about it though, right?
Oh
Like
sure, yeah, yeah. It's
it's
not.
just you stop taking the movie seriously.
Yeah,
It's unfortunate.
yeah. You don't treat it with the same respect that you do with a lot of other sci-fi from there. I think it. Yeah, I think you see a movie called The Time Machine, and you expect that must be one of the classics. That must be one of the biggies, from the era.
Yeah.
And it's not. It's a B movie that's cheesy, and
Yeah.
that's fine. That's okay. We can enjoy
I
that.
think I mean I'll say it like I think this movie deserves a remake. I think there's a lot here that you can explore. Um, and there are some themes that are brought up that are kind of abandoned, and that's you can do more with that, or you can just go the full like just the wonder of the world that he's all of a sudden in, and the possibilities of our future if we go into the very, very far future, where yeah, humanity is very different from what we know today, and could even look different than what we know today. And I think that is very cool. And so I am sort of looking forward to the remake just to see what they do. But I, I think if I were to become a movie director, I would do this one. I'll
I,
take on the responsibility of making a good Time
and
Machine
I think
adaptation.
this is one as well where if you're going to remake it, I would say that you add more to it. You add more time. You develop the future stuff more. You develop the
Oh, I think 80,000 years is a long enough time, but
no. I don't mean that. I mean more runtime, more length
okay.
to the movie.
Okay. I thought you meant
Um,
like go even further into the future. I'm like, well, that's a long time.
no. I
Human
mean,
humans as we know them today have only been around, I think, for like 10,000 years, right? Like
yeah.
it's around the time of the
And if
pyramids.
and if anything, I'd probably say something like you would maybe start in the future and do flashbacks to how he got here or something like that. Like really set the story in the future, and that's what this
Start
movie's
immediate
about.
threats. Well, this one kind of starts that way, right? Because it opens up
True,
where
he's already came back, yeah. But I mean,
yeah, like everyone's like waiting around. There's clocks everywhere. I had like a very Twilight Zone opening with just these clocks floating around. Like, oh, there is a fifth dimension.
also very Back to the Future. The opening shot of Back to the Future is just clocks, tick tock, tick tock,
Yeah.
tick tock. Um, so no, really, really good. In that sense, it's a fun movie. It's a fun movie. It's not. It's not like a super deep movie though. It wants to be. There's a couple of really noticeable miniatures. Like once like certain things starts happening with explosions or destruction, like we switch to just some toys of like a city street. Or even at the end, it's like these like mounds that are erupting kind of thing. That's like
Uh-huh.
a miniature, and it always looks like a miniature. It never even looks remotely like it's a real thing. Which again, it's
Yeah.
fine. It's all the time, but we're here to point these things out and critique. So worth
It's
mentioning.
hokey, but it's still pretty fun once like things get going. I think the beginning is a little bit boring, but it at least has some ideas that I enjoy. And yeah, and then it gets hokey, and you're just like, all right, it's just a Star Trek episode. Let's just go for it.
What I love about the the going forward through time sort of part. I mean, actually, I think we'll go into spoilers here just so we can talk about this properly. So, full spoilers now from this point on for the time machine. But before we start the spoiler section, Tara is going to tell you about Patreon.
Yeah, and if you like what we do, we want to support, and you can check out our Patreon page. It's patreon.com/MileFuzzTV. And donating as little as $1 per month gets you bonus episodes of The Ace. We do a lot of fun if you like B movies.
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
We do quite a lot of those on that. So check it out. Check out our Leviathan review, Judge Dredd, and of course a film that does not deserve to be on that list, but rather the regular one, is of course Time Cop. But
I know, how greedy were we?
Hey, we made it a bonus one, so you have to pay $1 for it.
Yeah, we gated Time Cop behind the paywall. Like how greedy were we? I know. I feel guilty.
So greedy.
I feel so guilty. Yeah, so you go to Patreon, check it out. So the movie starts, like we say, it's actually got like a really traditional backlot. It's like there's like fake snow, and it's just the Scottish guy sort of coming over to like visit. And what we find out is a week later. But no, it feels like a very classical movie, and the camera starts and it's all these people in their scarves, and like I don't know, it's a really fake looking street. It has that kind of classic movie look to it, which is not a complaint. It's just kind of the aesthetic that it's got. But George comes right in, and he's like all dirty, his shirt's ripped, and he's like, "Oh, you never believe the week I've had, gents. Never believe I've been on an adventure." And he starts telling, and it goes back to the night that he first introduced the idea, and we kind of talked about that, about them all being skeptical. So what shocked me though is that he basically, as soon as they leave the house that night, he writes a note, gives his like maid some instructions of what to do, and then he goes into another room, and it turns out he's already built a full-size time machine. I was like, oh, he's got it already. I thought it was going to be like, no, he spends time developing it or something. Like, part of the building it and try to get it to work was going to be part of the plot. No, he's got it already. It's there. He's done it. How does it work? Who cares?
Yeah, I was surprised by that too. Yeah, I was trying to look up something.
Was it something relevant to the show?
Yes, it was about fake snow.
Okay.
I don't know if you're aware of this, but it's sort of a well-known story about the Wizard of Oz. You remember the snow falling on the poppies and stuff to everybody could fall asleep and all that. Well, that fake snow that Hollywood used to use was actually made of asbestos. And so a lot of people got, like 40 years later, had asbestos-related injuries and illnesses and died from it because they used to use asbestos as fake snow. So I was trying to see if they used it for this one, but I don't think so. Although asbestos was used, through the 60s, I couldn't say for sure if the fake snow here was asbestos.
Good to know. I think they use like soap shavings is like one of the things they use sometimes.
But
yeah,
Disneyland here in California will do fake snow in the winter. They have like a fireworks display, and then this fake snow comes down, and it's just like soap bubbles.
Well, you're not gonna get any real snow, are you?
No, there is snow in California, and not too far from here, actually.
Yeah,
Big Bear Mountain.
Okay. Oh, top of a mountain. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Hey, a lot of people think California is the flat land, and that is a very common misconception.
Yeah. So, he goes into his time machine, and he goes forward like barely no time at all at first, to the point where like nothing really changes, and he's confused if anything's actually happened.
Yeah, it's like 6 days or something, right?
And then he goes forward a few years, and he gets to the point where I thought he was traveling much further, because he started talking about how the mannequin, because the one thing you can see from where he is in his house, there's like a store across the street, and you can see this mannequin, and he's talking about how, this mannequin became my best friend, basically, because I could see her, not aging through the eras. And he starts about, look at it, because he says something like, look at this ridiculous dress. I can't believe women wear this now.
Women would wear this?
Yeah. And I thought because he said that we'd traveled at least like 30 years, and like, fashion had completely changed. And then, but he's not even at World War I yet when he says that. It's like within 15 years of where he is. It's not even that different. Because I thought it was going to...
women's fashion does change a lot, in his defense.
It does. Let's be honest though, everything that's old looks the same to me. It just all looks old. It just all looks like olden times. because I thought it
Till you
was
get the 80s, right? Or the 60s, maybe.
60.
You don't
Well,
really notice.
that's what I was thinking, because this was made in 1960. I thought it was going to keep changing until like, oh, it was like a mini skirt or something like in 1960, and he's going to be like, what? That's
Like,
how.
ooh, maybe I'll stay here.
Yeah, what is this? Things have changed so much.
What? Free love?
But he I suppose in 1960 itself that wasn't a like maybe a concept yet, but even though we associate that with the 60s, I don't know if as soon as I
Yeah,
hit 1960 everyone was, because I mean, keep in mind this was probably shot in 1959 as well, so it's not like,
that's true.
yeah. So he gets to like World War One and sees like, you know, the evidence of like things, and or no, it doesn't actually, because that obviously doesn't happen to World War Two. He goes past World War One, or he's in the middle of World War One, and this is when he gets out,
Yeah.
and he goes across the street and he runs into David's son, James, who breaks the news to him that his dad's dead and he died in the war a couple of years ago. And he's like, war? What war? And obviously, to anyone during World War One, if someone said, what war? They'd be like, what? Like,
Mhm.
we're at war with Germany, man. Get a hold of yourself. And it's this very kind of depressing thing for him to hear. And it's one of those things where he gets back in the time machine, and of course he gets to World War Two, and it doesn't stop there. He just kind of keeps traveling, but you can sort of see things happening over the top of him, and he hears like
Mhm.
planes and he sees explosions, and it's kind of like, no, like no, there was another war. And he's like, shit.
Yeah, and he makes a comment saying, at first I thought this was the same war that had
Yeah.
just gone on this long. But which I've made that mistake, because I once, when I went and saw Master and Commander, it opens up at the big battle scene,
Mm.
and then I fell asleep and I woke up in the last battle scene, and I thought, wow, this movie's nothing but action.
I'm not so sure that's the exact same thing, but yeah, I get what you mean.
The same thing.
But he you know,
I definitely
obviously
time travel.
he's mortified. He's mortified by this, and he ends up in 1966. And I kind of went, oh, that's interesting. That's just a little bit ahead.
Hmm.
It's in the future of when the movie was made, and people are wearing kind of like spacesuits at one point, like as they're running through the streets. But otherwise it's kind of 1960. But there's also like a train that feels a bit futuristic. Like it's kind of this weird mix. It's kind of like we're mostly going to be present day like stuff, but we're going to have these like futuristic elements sprinkled in.
Yes, yes. Like a lot of the fashion is the same except for the silver jumpsuits.
Yes, and there's like and it's like the old version of James, the guy he met in the 40, sorry, in World War One. He's like, I remember you.
Mhm.
I remember you from like 40 years ago. Like, this is
You
mad.
haven't aged.
But there's sirens going off because the bombs are coming. It's funny how he arrives right at the moment before the actual like everyone's going to get nuked moment happens, because that's what happens. Like everything starts
Yeah,
breaking. He just gets
poor timing.
he gets back to the time machine just in time to like get out without being, because like while he's traveling through time, it's almost like there's a protective bubble where he doesn't get affected by anything, so he survives
Hmm.
like the explosions, and he keeps going, and he just keeps going further and further. We see like more domes being built after the apocalypse, like so it's like post-apocalyptic, and then like domes are built, and it's like, oh, maybe things have gotten better, and then he eventually stops and like 78,000 something. It was something in that range, and that's where kind of the second half of the movie picks up, and where we get the story, or the closest thing we have to a story. Takes place in this half.
Right, and this I did enjoy this part where he's traveling through time. It still can't quite get past its own hokiness. Or like even just seeing everyone in the silver jumpsuit was just a little cheesy, but I understand the point that they were trying to make. Like man just cannot help but try to destroy itself,
Yeah.
and which is unfortunate. And that's that's a very real fear that they were living in the 60s, or in the beginning of the 60s too.
Yeah, and of
And
course, in World War One, it was
yeah.
very much the West and Germany kind of fighting, and then obviously in the 60s, it's just the West and the East outright. This idea of the Cold War, and obviously one of the big things when we get to this last part of the movie, this big second half, is that at first it seems like this tranquil place where no one speaks and everyone's just eating fruit all the time. But we do discover that there are two sides. There's a side. The Morlocks are underground, and then there's these was it the
Eloy?
Who are the sort of they're the ones especially that are at a Star Trek episode walking around in their robes, or not robes,
Mhm.
shawls. Shawl, is that the right word?
It was explained because he runs into technology eventually that tells him like what happened, why people went underground. And it was the people who were dependent on technology that went underground. And those who did not stayed above ground and took their chances, and they thrived. And the people underground became monsters.
Yeah, but the people underground actually have control of the people up top, and
They do, because nothing grows underground, so they have to eat
yeah,
something.
yes, yes. So, but they supply.
I did want to mention that I do remember the scene in the book pretty well about his traveling through time. And one of the cool things in the film that was done in the book as well is that eventually, because of all the war, although this wasn't, I don't think this part was in the book, but eventually, because of all the movements of the earth in that amount of time, like he gets fully engulfed in rock and encased. And the reason he goes so far in the future is because he's stuck. Like he can't get out of there unless he keeps going forward or goes back in time.
Honestly, that makes sense.
So,
I was thinking about that during the movie actually. That if this was being accurate, then I mean, apart from the fact that the Earth is spinning, let's just say for argument's sake that it's tied to like the gravitational pull of the Earth, so you're always in the same place relative to the core of the Earth, right? Fine, we'll accept that, you know, because that's something you can poke it back to the future as well. Is like, well, the Earth is moving through space, so technically, if you traveled 30 years, you know, in time, you would just be in space and die instantly. Like that's what would really happen theoretically.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but fine, we roll with that. That's fine. But I was thinking about, okay, he's in the same place, and it's just lucky that it's still a flat surface, and there's like, you know, nothing's changed landscape wise. Like, yeah, like he should be in rock or whatever. I was thinking about that actually, so I'm glad you brought that up.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, I have to imagine it's a budget thing. But one of the things you just made me think of there though is that yeah, we were saying how okay it's set in like almost present day 1966, you know, just a few years later, but the thing is the book was written at the, you know, when the movie takes place at the start, so everything from the future that's used to like, hey, this is the time that he's going through is all stuff that's been kind of in a way added for the movie because none of that was known when he wrote the book. So
Right.
so I wonder if the weird thing with the 60s where it's like kind of present day but it's also futuristic, I wonder if that just comes from the fact that in the book it calls for this futuristic thing because this is right before the bombs hit, but because it's like so close to present day, it's like, well, we have to make it kind of look like present day too.
Yeah, it could be. I can't really recall if I think there are other civilizations that he visits in the future and then eventually keeps going and has to keep going because of the rocks. And that's why he ends up so far in the future. But I can't say, yeah, I think it is a little bit more hopeful in the book where it looks like mankind is heading in the right direction. But then it's kind of all for naught, you know, because once you get so far in the future, like none of our history matters anymore.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's what happens in the movie as well, is that they don't really know anything about the past beyond their own existence, and they don't really care. And obviously this is really depressing for him because it's like, oh, you know, it doesn't matter. Like, you know, he gets really angry when finally gets to a book, and the book just crumbles because no one reads books anymore. No one cares. The entire history of civilization is just irrelevant. And of course we meet these people, and like, you know, the woman he saves, Weena, is drowning, and no one seems to care. Everyone's just so placid and docile and just doesn't give a shit about anything. They're just happy to keep sauntering around and eating their fruit and then dying, and no one cares. But there's no old people, and one of the big things we find out is that once they reach a certain age, they are called into the temple that leads underground. And of course, we eventually go in there because obviously George isn't willing to just take this lying down and accept it. He you know, goes in with Weena, and they find that, oh wait, no, they're eating people. Like that's where they call them in. They call them in to kill them. And Weena is called in like with all the other 21-year-olds or whatever age they are. And they're brought in, and he has to go in and try and save them. So it is very much a Star Trek episode, and all he really does is run in and kind of fight off the monsters with some like fire. As he tries to like sort of liberate the people and let them run away, kind of thing. But
yeah, well, I mean, he's still stuck in his own ways and culture and time, and yeah, he's very much, I got to be the hero because that's what I would do in my own time, and this is a woman who needs help, who's helpless. And
it is worth mentioning
also his time machine goes missing.
Yeah, the Morlocks take it, so he's looking for that. He eventually finds it, of course, by the end. But I think one of the things that's interesting to point out here that a remake could really play with, is that in this future, there's no like shades of grey. It's just very clear that one side is the evil side because they're eating people, and then the other side are just the innocent victims. Like a far more interesting, story might be that no, you can kind of see like both sides and why they've picked the sides they're in, and like, you know.
Well, every ecosystem has predator and prey.
Mm.
And when you're so far removed from it, then in this case, like, are they even the same species anymore?
True. I don't think
When you
that's.
have the
I don't
the
think that's.
Eloi and the Morlock?
I don't think that's what the movie's trying to say, though. I think the movie's more about just two people split into two factions again, and they're one's taking advantage of the
Yeah.
other. I think that's what the movie's. I don't think the movie's trying to make any points
Yeah,
about.
well, you were saying with
Yeah.
the remake and what they can explore with
Oh,
that.
sure, yeah.
And like I watch or documentaries about um like the snow leopard trying to survive or a polar bear trying to eat its prey. And I feel bad when they miss the catch. But I also feel good that the seal got to live. But at the same time, I don't want to see all the polar bears go extinct, and they have to eat
Of
seals.
course.
So
Yeah. Also, I'm always going to root for certain animals over others, just because if there's a big cat, I'm probably rooting for the cat. The Giselle or whatever's getting hunted. Like your time is up, because Tony the tiger is feeding time.
You said Giselle, and it just makes me think of Tom Brady's wife, Gazelle.
Sorry, Gazelle, yes. Silly, I can say silly things sometimes. It happens.
Well, it's good. So the score is now Peter 2 and Tara 212. So
Yeah,
I'm grateful that you edit so many of them out.
Yes, you're welcome. But like, I think the because when he first sneaks into the area and you can see some of the Morlocks like sneaking around under the stairs and they're sort of looking. You can see their eyes glowing. They're just in silhouette. They're in shadows. That stuff looks quite good and creepy. Once they're actually running about out in the light and it's a bit, they're in suits. This guy's in suits. It's whatever. I feel like the movie
They're a little slow.
they're a bit slow. The movie, like there could just be so much to say here about the way this dynamics worked out, but it doesn't really do anything with it. It's just he wants to fix it because people shouldn't be fighting. They should all be united. Blah blah blah. And he has to come back. And he wants to actually take Weena back with him. She's going to come with him, but he's actually in the temple now, right? And when he goes into the time machine, the temple door's shut behind him. And I was actually, I was impressed here because I thought there was going to be a plot hole. Because I said to myself, if he travels back to his own time, he's not in the same place anymore. He shouldn't arrive back in that room. But to the movie's credit, not only do they have him arrive back, kind of like maybe like 15 yards away from that room, outside in the yard. Like they actually make a plot point out of it where he has to drag it back in so that if he travels back to the future again, he'll be outside the temple and he can be with Weena, which is what he does. That's what he does at the end here. After he's like tried to talk to everyone and no one really believes him except David, who comes back and like believes that he's left, and he's like, I understand it now. I understand it. He moved it back in here. That's why the scratches are on the floor, and he went back to the future. So now he's outside of the temple. And he could be with Weena. It's kind of beautiful.
Uncanny. Your best impression so far.
Thank you. So what I was saying, how there was a couple of dated sort of like moments with the Weena character. Is after they've kind of won already before he goes back. He's sitting with her at the fire, like at the fire. I was gonna say fireplace, not fireplace, but
she's just gushing over him.
She's gushing over him, but the line that really stuck out to me is she says something like, the women in your time, what do they do with their hair? And she's like, and I'm like, why does she care about hair? She's been in a society who's never given a shit about looks or fashion or hair or any of that stuff. But for some reason, whoever wrote this script is like, she'd want to know about the hairstyles. Yeah, she's excited about hair.
Typical woman.
She's going to get her hair done. Oh my god. It's like, do you have a woman? Is it no one? Oh.
Yeah, that part really stuck out to me as well.
It made me think a little bit of Stargate. You know how like James Spader's there's that one girl who just instantly wants to marry him, like when they show up on the planet. It made me think of that a little bit.
Yes. I'm definitely not a loser in my time either. I'm a hero.
Yes, I am so
All the
cool.
ladies love me.
I'm so cool in 1899. They always say, George, you're so cool.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so the ending's fine. The ending's fine. His slow discovery of like that the society is not what he was hoping the future would be, but he's going to maybe try and help build it. Because there's
Hmm.
actually not a reason why he can't come back. Like, because they say, well, do you think he'll ever come back? Because it's the Scottish guy and the maid who are like, will he ever come back? It's like, I don't know. Although the implication is that he wouldn't, because we did hear earlier on from his son that he disappeared. Um,
Yep.
so that implies that he never came back, which I guess means
Right.
this movie's logic follows the idea that everything that he was going to do, he was always going to do, and that's why, like,
I
so
suppose he can't change anything, right?
yeah,
Because then he wouldn't be able to be with Weena in the future.
exactly.
And yeah, it makes sense because then David, purchases the place and makes sure that nobody tears it down so that he has safe travel or something. Or you never know, like maybe he wants to come back and this place will be preserved for him so long as, this area is preserved,
Mm,
not blown apart by war.
yeah. So it ends kind of hopeful with him, walking out into the night. The Scottish guy that is, David, and just being like, that guy, my mate Georgie, went to the future.
Yeah.
That's the movie. That's basically it. Honestly, yeah, it's a
That's
movie
it.
that I don't have like a ton to say about it, honestly. It's a very simple movie. It feels like, it really feels like a prototype for time travel movies. And it's not necessarily the first time travel movie, but it feels like a prototype in that it feels like they're just like fascinated by the idea that they could do a story like this, and they did the simplest version of it relatively
It is
possible.
scarier, right, to make a time travel film about going to the future than it is about going to the past.
I think so, yeah. Um, and,
And yeah, I like the risk. I like it. We don't get to see.
and it,
I don't think we really get any other films other than this one and the remake, probably about going into the far, far future.
Yeah, and I don't want to like sound like I'm bashing it, because I actually really appreciate this step in the timeline. That this step in kind of like the journey of like science fiction films of like experimenting with this stuff, because without a time machine, do we get to Back to the Future? Do we get to the Terminator? Do we get to these things
Yeah,
that I
but
think are
there's
better?
an argument here that so much of everything that is good in this movie comes from the book,
Sure.
and the book is such an easy short read. Like just if you want, instead of watching 2 hours of the film, spend 4 hours reading the book, and you'll get way more out of it.
Yeah. Oh, the movie's actually an hour 40. It's actually it's a fairly brisk movie, actually.
Yeah, it's an easy watch. I'm not like bashing it because I'm trying to sound like pretentious, like, oh, read the book. But it's obviously the movie is going to be an easier
Hey
watch
everyone, I'm Hollywood
than reading.
Tara,
But
and I'm here to tell you to read the book because the book's better than the
mhm.
movie.
Let me
Yeah.
get out my bachelor's degree and my glasses and say, yes, I don't even watch television. I barely owned one.
I barely own one. What does that even
I own half
mean?
of one. That's all you can see on my screen.
Yes. uh, I barely own one, meaning that I own a black and white CRT from the 60s that barely operates. I had to get some sort of adapter to stick my HDMI cable in it so it would get a signal.
Yeah. But it's a fun movie to watch. It's definitely one I liked more when I was a kid than watching it now, but it has its charm. It's a little dated, but I
It's
don't always hold that against a
Oh
film
sure, like
that's
it's a
certain
fine
topic.
time capsule of its era, but it's not. It
Yeah.
doesn't hold up like some of the other ones that we've covered from this era. It doesn't hold up like Day the Earth
Right.
Stood Still, Day the Earth Caught Fire, or even The Invisible Man, which we didn't have a ton to say as a message. But The Invisible Man, for a movie that's 30 years prior to this, I think holds up as a better finished film where it still works and
Hmm.
still gets the effect that it wants to through its filmmaking and its humor and its everything else. So yeah, um, I guess that's what I'd say. Tara, would you like to rate the time machine?
Yes, I would. Yeah, I still recommend it. I think it's a fun watch if you have a weekend where Sunday afternoon you're just chilling, waste time,
Sunday
put on
afternoon.
the time machine.
Yeah, I think that's when you do it.
And Yeah. It has its charms. There's a lot of familiar faces from the Twilight Zone. The main actor we was in the episode where all the astronauts are disappearing.
Mm-hmm.
That was a good one. Yeah, there's a lot of that guys, and it looks like a original series episode of Star Trek, which is always a fun to watch, even if it's not very good. So I'd say this movie is a 7. I like the ideas of it, that it tries to add from the book, or like outside of the book, like its own ideas to try to make it more of a film. And I wish it was a little bit better directed. That's all.
I think you're kind of in the right place. I think a 7 sounds about right. I'm tempted to lower it slightly. Because I think ultimately
What you think is fair?
I think like that sounds about right, but I'm thinking about, like, do I class it as a really good movie, or do I class it as something that is dated, has some charm, but I wouldn't actually say, hey, this is something you need to see. And I think on that basis, I'm going to give it a 6.5.
Okay.
But it's an easy watch though. It's just a fun 6.5. It's not.
Yeah, I wouldn't. That's definitely fair.
Yeah. Cool. I'm glad we've reached an amicable understanding of our feelings on the time machine.
Mm-hmm. Once again, we're pretty in sync on this one.
Yes. Yes.
Not a lot of arguments here.
Yes. Unfortunately, we didn't have time to do a Mystery Science Theater this week because this episode may have benefited from one, actually. Being a little bit shorter, but
yeah, we had a rough week, so getting this review up. Yeah, everything was postponed this week.
yes, and we did just do the top 50 movies as voted for by everyone, by the audience. The second half of that we just recorded this week. Obviously, by the time you get this episode, that'll be like a week or two ago. By the time that went up, but just know
if you haven't watched it yet, just check it out.
Yeah, if you want to see.
I get really drunk.
Tara gets really drunk, and the second half,
which I will never do on another one of these. So there you go. That's all you're getting.
Cherish it, because it's the one and only. Well, the two and only, I suppose I should technically say, but
it's a two-parter, right? Like Kill Bill.
Exactly. Yeah.
You watch them together.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not looking forward to editing that second one, though. I'm not gonna lie. Not looking forward to it. But that is The Time Machine. That is H.G. Wells' The Time Machine from 1960. So another time travel movie, and I'm going to see what's coming next time. And once again, we didn't check before we started, which could bite us because
so unprofessional.
Because it might be something that was, hey, I want to change that maybe. It's actually the Patreon vote winner. Oh,
that's right. I was going to say the one after that because we did change it.
yes. But,
for my request.
But we have another one first. We have Wing Commander to do next week.
I know. What the hell, patrons?
That's what they voted for.
It was the vote was video game movie.
Yes.
With Wing Commander.
It was that Doom. Right. Something else. I can't remember. It was 4 sci-fi video game movies.
Doom is definitely more fun.
Have you seen Wing Commander?
It wasn't Ready Player One. Oh, Assassin's Creed was one of them.
Assassin's Creed was one. Yeah, that's right. I don't know. We'll see.
Mario Brothers? No.
No, it wasn't that.
Oh.
It wasn't that. But hey, so yeah, we're going to do Wing Commander. So if you want to see us, that's the sort of one where it might be a long discussion just because of how bad it is, as opposed to, the good
I've
reasons.
never seen it.
I've never seen it either.
I played some of the games when I was a kid. I remember the one with Mark Hamill and who plays Soren in Star Trek Generations. McDowell.
Yeah, you could have said Clockwork Orange. Malcolm McDowell. Yes.
I always say Rodney.
Yes, you can definitely check out Wing Commander next week, which is the next episode of the Ace. Also worth mentioning though, I'm not sure when this will be going up, but it's entirely possible by the time this goes up, our Dark Fate review will have been up as an extra episode. So if it's not been up, it'll be soon, and if it has been up, then go check it out. That's Terminator Dark Fate. So.
Come on, Dark Fate, be good.
I know, we're hoping. We're hoping. And hopefully our Patreon bonus episode for the month has also happened by now, which would have been Trancers 2. So hopefully that was fun.
It's about time.
It's about time. Have to get through this Transfers franchise, all 7 of them.
Jesus Christ.
So, go to Patreon, check it out. Rate the podcast on Apple Podcasts, give us 5 stars, nice little review. It helps more people find us, so that helps us a lot, as does, of course, Patreon if you want to do that financially. You can, of course, get us on the Twitters at the Ace Podcast, and you can follow us on there for updates and whatever else. You can check out other content we have. We obviously do Twilight Zone reviews every week. Me and Tara do. We talk about classic episodes of Twilight Zone, so that's very relevant maybe if you're into these sci-fi movie discussions, especially these classic sci-fi movies. You can also check out other stuff such as Screams After Midnight, the horror movie podcast that I do with Tim, which right now, I assume this is still going up during October. If it isn't, then ignore this. But during October, we do the Octoberthon, where we do an episode every single day. So there's tons of Screams After Midnight episodes going out to enjoy. So, yeah, good fun. And this review's taken all
That's a long one.
Yeah, this review's taken so much out of Tara. So, good thing we're wrapping up. This has been the Atomic Cinema Experiment. We have been talking about the time machine. Thank you once again for watching or listening. We always appreciate it. Keep watching sci-fi movies, guys. And remember to ask the computer to add salsa.
Yum, yum.